Officer Rick Voller had been untouchable for years. White, decorated, and loud. He strutted into courtrooms like they were locker rooms, smirking, man-spreading, tossing insults behind his badge. His record was littered with complaints from black men who swore he beat them for nothing. None of it ever stuck, until he stood trial under Judge Amara Blackwell, a black woman with natural hair, steel in her eyes, and no patience for performative respect. It was supposed to be just another hearing, another dismissal, another cop walking free. But when Judge Blackwell questioned his use of force, Rick lost control. In a split-second meltdown, he stepped out from the defendant's chair, pulled scissors from his pocket, and cut her hair. In front of the jury. In front of the press. "You don't deserve to wear it like that," he snarled. "You want power? Act like it." Silence fell. Then cameras flashed, and that's when the system, the same one that always protected him, finally turned. Because the woman he humiliated wasn't just a judge. She was justice embodied. And Rick? He didn't walk out of that courtroom. He was dragged into a prison full of men who remembered his fists and now had nothing to lose. They thought he owned the badge, but this time, justice wore the robe. What would you do if someone touched your mother like that? In court, no less. Comment where you're watching this from. And if you still believe silence equals safety, like and share if you know, real power doesn't shout, it sentences. Amara Blackwell didn't grow up imagining herself in a courtroom. She grew up watching her father get pulled over for the 5th time in a single summer, watching her older brother get slammed against a hood for matching a description, watching her mother braid her hair and whisper, "Keep your chin high, but your voice low." But Amara never mastered the art of staying quiet. She was the girl who questioned teachers when textbooks erased history. The girl who walked out of class when a cop pushed a kid for speaking back. The girl who didn't just want justice, she wanted to wear it. At 38, she was now one of the youngest and few black female judges in the state. And she wore it all with purpose. Her bench was her battlefield. Her natural hair was her crown. Every twist, every coil, every unapologetic inch of it told the world, "I didn't straighten myself to get here, and I won't start now." They called her harsh, uncompromising. What they meant was she didn't flinch. Not when defense attorneys tried to smirk her down. Not when the media mocked her hair, her tone, her expression. They could take their condescension. She had decisions to write. Rick Voller wore the uniform like it was armor, not against crime, but against accountability. At 43, he'd served 17 years with the department. He had commendations, photos with mayors, plaques for bravery, and a sealed folder full of misconduct complaints. He called them whining. He said things like, "You want less force? Obey faster." He smiled when people filmed him. He knew the angle game better than anyone. He was white, tall, good-looking in the news camera way, spoke clean, stood straight, but his eyes never smiled when his mouth did. People like Rick didn't scream racism. They performed power. Quietly. Deadly. He patrolled neighborhoods where he wouldn't let his own kids ride bikes. He threw boys to the ground for attention and called it procedure. He once told a rookie, "Don't worry about complaints. If they could take us down, we wouldn't be standing in the first place." And for over a decade, he was right. Every complaint dissolved. Every video unclear. Every victim hostile. He was protected. Until he wasn't. The case that brought them together was supposed to be routine. A traffic stop. Black teen. Body cam accidentally off. Hospital visit. Internal Affairs filed it quietly, but one video slipped through from a civilian phone. Shaky. Distant. But clear enough. A boy, unarmed, hands up. Rick's voice, "Get on the ground now." The boy replies, "I'm already down." Then the kick. Then the screams. The community erupted. Protests. Hashtags. Local news. Civil rights attorneys demanded real charges. And for once, the system blinked. Rick was indicted. And the case landed on Judge Amara Blackwell's desk. Her clerk looked nervous when she saw the file. "You sure you want this one?" Amara didn't blink. "I want everyone." Rick smirked when he saw her name on the docket. "Perfect," he muttered to his lawyer. Let's give her a real show. He showed up in uniform, even though he was suspended, sat with his legs spread wide, chewed gum, looked around the courtroom like it was his domain. He barely looked at Amara. To him, she was just another woman with something to prove. What he didn't realize, she had already proven it. To herself, to her family, to every black girl watching from the gallery, hair natural, back straight, eyes filled with fire. The trial began. Tensions were thick. Outside, protesters. Inside, silence. The jury watched, cameras rolled, and Amara, steady, measured, poised, ran the courtroom like a scalpel through infection. Rick on the stand was slick. He smiled, lied well, knew which words to avoid. But Amara's questions weren't about the punch. They were about why the punch felt justified to him. She asked about power, about fear, about dehumanization. His jaw tightened. She was chipping away, not at his defense, but at his delusion of righteousness. Day 4. Mid-hearing. Rick's lawyer fumbled a response. Amara leaned in. Cool, sharp, direct. Mr. Voller, she said, is there any part of you, any that believes this boy deserved to be treated like that? Something in Rick snapped. He stood. People thought he was just going to shout. But then, he reached into his jacket. Gasps. Panic. A guard stepped forward. But Rick didn't draw a weapon. He pulled out a pair of scissors. Stepped toward the bench. Toward Amara. Everyone froze. She didn't move. He walked right up, and in one vicious motion, cut a thick strand of her hair. Gasps. Cries. Cameras clicked. A juror dropped their pen. He looked her dead in the eyes. You don't deserve to wear it like that, he hissed. You want to be in power? Then look the part. Amara didn't move. She didn't scream. She didn't even touch her hair. She looked at the scissors in his hand, then into his eyes, and said one sentence. That was your last free choice. The courtroom was chaos. Gasps filled the air. Phones dropped. A bailiff drew his weapon. But Judge Amara Blackwell didn't move. Not an inch. A lock of her hair lay on the floor, beside her heels, thick, natural, carefully twisted that morning. Now it was severed, still curled, but limp like a snake that had been cut mid-strike. Rick Voller stood above her, scissors still in hand, smirking like a schoolyard bully. You don't deserve to wear it like that, he had said, but even in the weight of that moment, with every camera in the room pointed at her, every person holding their breath, Amara did not blink. Her voice didn't waver. Her chin didn't drop. Her authority did not shatter. She looked Rick dead in the eyes. That, she said, was your last free choice. The words were colder than the air conditioning, and they hit harder than a gavel ever could. The bailiffs tackled Rick to the ground. The scissors clattered. His smirk vanished. He resisted. Not violently, but with the desperation of a man who suddenly realized he had no script for this part. Handcuffs clicked, and for the first time since stepping into the courtroom, Rick looked small. Not commanding, not powerful, just pathetic. Outside, the crowd exploded. News outlets pushed notifications within seconds. Suspended officer cuts black judge's hair in courtroom meltdown. Shocking attack on Justice Amara Blackwell sparks national outrage. Symbolic violence. A black woman's hair targeted in courtroom assault. Social media erupted. The video went viral in less than 20 minutes. The hashtags trended in under an hour. Hashtag hands off her crown. Hashtag justice for Amara. Hashtag Voller the violent. But with the outrage came something else. Division. Because the world didn't agree on what happened. Some called it assault. Some said it was just hair. Some tried to justify it. He snapped, people make mistakes. But for black women across the country, the message was clear. He didn't just cut hair. He tried to cut power. He tried to cut identity. He tried to reduce her down to silence. And Amara's refusal to flinch? That became a symbol. Back inside, Amara left the courtroom only after order was restored. She walked out with her head high, the severed lock still on the floor behind her. No tears, no press statement, no social media post. She simply went home, alone. That night, she sat in her kitchen with the lights off. She didn't cry, but she also didn't sleep, because she knew this wasn't over. There would be interviews, protests, backlash, politics, and worse, whispers in places she couldn't record. There would be judges, lawyers, even friends who would ask her to calm it down, to not escalate, to focus on healing, not revenge. But Amara wasn't interested in revenge. She wanted the truth to matter. She wanted the robe to mean something. She wanted that cage they put black men into finally open for one of the men who put them there. Rick spent his first night in holding. No special treatment. No private cell. Just concrete walls and fluorescent lights. His booking photo, red-faced, hair messed, eyes wide, was plastered across the internet by morning. He tried to explain it away, claimed temporary insanity, stress, flashbacks, misunderstanding. But the video said everything his words tried to escape. His badge was stripped within 24 hours. His union released a carefully worded statement. His department claimed shock and disappointment. And the district attorney? They added felony assault, intimidation of a public official, and violation of civil rights to his growing list of charges. For the first time in his life, Rick Voller was not the man behind the gun, the badge, or the desk. He was the man behind bars. Meanwhile, Amara returned to court the very next day. Same bench, same black robe, but a shorter twist in her crown. She did not wear a wig. She did not hide the damage. And when someone from the press asked if she planned to recuse herself from Rick's case, she responded, "No, I'm not afraid of finishing what he started." The case shifted tone. The assault changed everything. Now, the trial wasn't just about what Rick did on the street. It was about who he thought he was, even in front of a judge. Witnesses began to come forward. Men who were afraid before, now emboldened. He slammed me into the pavement for asking a question. He laughed when I cried. He called me boy and said, "Nobody's watching." But now everyone was watching. Rick's arrogance became his undoing. What once was a badge became a stain. What once was silence became a storm. Back in jail, Rick got moved to general population. He protested, filed for protective custody, denied. The system he used to control now ran without him. And worse, inmate number 43705 in his block was Tyrese Darnell, one of the men Rick had arrested and beaten 5 years earlier. Tyrese remembered the boots, the baton, the smirk. Now, he saw Rick in an orange jumpsuit, eyes darting, hands fidgeting. And for once, Rick didn't smirk back. Because justice had a new face. Rick Voller had always believed that jail was a place for them. Not for him. Not for a decorated officer. Not for a man who'd kept the streets clean. Not for someone who knew the rules better than anyone else. But now he woke up to the sound of steel bars clanging and a toilet flushing 5 feet from his head. The cell was small, the mattress thin, and the silence? It wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. He wasn't a cop here. He wasn't in charge. He was just another name, another number, another man in orange. The guards didn't respect him. The inmates? They recognized him. Oh, they remembered. Some with eyes, some with scars, some with missing teeth. They didn't rush him. They waited, because nothing unsettles a man like the weight of being watched. Not for admiration, not for intimidation, but for payback. Tyrese Darnell was the first to make contact. He didn't yell. He didn't swing. He just walked up to Rick during chow and said, "You remember what you told me when you broke my ribs?" Rick froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. Tyrese leaned in. "Come, I see. You said you'll forget this pain. But I won't forget your face." Tyrese smiled. Turns out I didn't forget either. Then walked off. That night, Rick barely slept. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, Judge Amara Blackwell had become a lightning rod. Some called her a hero. Others called her a threat. All eyes were on her. There were interviews she declined. Invitations to speak she ignored. Because Amara didn't want a spotlight. She wanted a system that worked. But the system was pushing back. She received anonymous letters. Emails filled with hate. One message simply read, "You may wear the robe, but you'll never wear the crown." She deleted them. filed the threats, kept going, because she wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person who had been silenced in courtrooms like hers. Then came the protest, not against Rick, against her. A group of off-duty officers and their supporters gathered outside the courthouse. Signs, flags, chants, bias on the bench. Impeach Blackwell. Justice shouldn't wear an afro. They tried to paint her as unstable, unfit, unprofessional. They circulated clips of her in college, at protests, on debate stages, calling for police reform, as if truth-telling was grounds for disqualification. But Amara didn't flinch. She showed up to court every day. Hair still natural, even shorter now. Proudly so. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. The district attorney's office escalated Rick's case. Now, they weren't just trying to convict him for the courtroom assault. They were opening up past complaints, old body cam footage, whistleblower testimonies. What was once one case had become a movement, a reckoning. In jail, Rick felt it all closing in. Letters stopped coming. His lawyer stopped answering fast. His fiancée left a message with the warden. Tell him, I can't explain this to my family anymore. He sat on his bunk, staring at his hands. The same hands that once pushed, punched, choked. Now, they trembled. And then it got worse. One afternoon, a guard handed him a piece of folded paper. No name, no context, just 5 words scrawled in rough handwriting. Tomorrow, shower, bring no ego. He recognized the penmanship, Tyrese. That night, Rick tried to fake an illness, said he needed medical, said he felt unsafe. The nurse checked him out, cleared him. The guard shrugged. You're Gen Pop now. You wanted to be a tough guy. Time to prove it. Rick didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just waited. Elsewhere, Amara sat in chambers, reviewing evidence. She was tired, not from the job, from the weight of being right in a world that wanted her to be silent. Her clerk knocked softly. Ma'am, they reopened the Montgomery file. Amara looked up. The Montgomery file, Rick's oldest brutality complaint. Buried years ago. The victim? A 13-year-old boy. Amara held the report. His name was Jordan Montgomery. Now, 23. Silent for a decade. Until now. He had agreed to testify. Amara closed her eyes, breathed deep. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was a reckoning 10 years in the making. And it had just reached its boiling point. The morning came without light. Gray clouds pressed down on the prison yard like they were judging it. Rick Voller sat on the edge of his bunk, shirt damp with sweat, hands clenched so tight they trembled. The note still burned in his mind. Tomorrow, shower, bring no ego. He hadn't told anyone, not the guards, not his lawyer, because some part of him, some sick, stubborn part, still believed he could control this. He couldn't. At 9:15 a.m., the cell doors opened. He walked slowly, past eyes that had memorized a smirk for years, past men who had worn zip ties from his wrists, past hands that remembered his fists. The shower room was cold, concrete echo chamber. Rick stepped in and waited. At 9:21, Tyrese Darnell walked in. Behind him, 2 others, quiet, focused. Rick's heart thudded, but they didn't swing. Tyrese stepped forward, not aggressive, deliberate. You remember what you used to say? He asked. Nobody's filming, so nobody cares. He stepped closer. Well, guess what, Voller? Nobody's filming, and I care. Rick didn't speak, didn't beg. He just nodded. Tyrese didn't hit him. He cut his shirt open with a shiv. Not skin, just cloth. Humiliating, methodical, measured. This is what it feels like, Tyrese whispered. To be powerless, to be watched. Then they walked out, silent, no bruises, just message delivered. Rick collapsed, not from pain, from the weight of it. Back in his cell, Rick curled up on a mattress. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just laid there, face turned to the wall. And for the first time in his life, he felt what it meant to be afraid of tomorrow. Meanwhile, in a courthouse 23 miles away, Judge Amara Blackwell stared at a file that hadn't seen daylight in a decade. The Montgomery file. Jordan Montgomery, age 13, beaten in a parking lot. Accused of stealing a bike that was his. No charges filed. No trial. Just 3 cracked ribs and a broken spirit. And the officer on the report? Rick Voller. The file had been buried, sealed as unsubstantiated. But now, Jordan was ready to testify. He'd sent a statement. He wanted the world to know. Amara read the words slowly. I spent 10 years thinking I deserved what happened, but after seeing what he did to you, I realized he was never power. He was just permission. That line stuck with her. He was just permission. Permission to fear. Permission to hurt. Permission to break people and call it law. That night, Amara sat in her apartment, robe off, hair loose. She stared into the mirror, not at the scar where the scissors had bitten her, but at her own eyes. She had upheld the law every day of her career. But tonight she wondered, what happens when the law is too slow for justice? Could she still trust it? Could she still trust herself? Then she opened her drawer, pulled out a file she kept hidden, one no clerk knew about. Inside, transcripts, old testimonies, closed cases, stories from other black women judges across the country. Harassed, threatened, undermined. She flipped to a quote from one of them. We don't wear the robe to protect the court. We wear it to protect the ones who never made it inside. Amara closed the file and made a decision. The next day, the courtroom was full. Media, community leaders, former victims, Rick's old partners, even people who once doubted Amara, they were there. Rick was brought in, wrists chained, head lowered, hollow eyes. He didn't look up, didn't speak, just sat, waiting. Amara entered. Silence followed. She took her seat and began to speak, not with fury, not with tears, but with control. This courtroom has seen many things, she began. Crimes, excuses, patterns, and now a reckoning. She looked directly at Rick. Mr. Voller is not here today because of one mistake. He is here because the system allowed him to believe he could make any mistake and never answer for it. She turned to the jury. That ends today. This court is not just a room. It is a mirror. And today we show this country what it's been too afraid to look at. Gasps, applause, tension so thick it pulsed. Amara held up the Montgomery file and said one sentence. Let this be admitted into the official record. The courtroom was full, but no one breathed. Judge Amara Blackwell stood behind the bench, spine straight, gaze fixed. Across from her, Rick Voller sat in chains. The orange jumpsuit looked too big now. His once proud shoulders had sunk. His eyes, always scanning, were hollow, not from fear, but from exposure. He knew. This was the moment. No badge, no brothers in blue, no union, no shield, just him, his past, and every soul he'd ever reduced to a case file. The clerk stepped forward. Your Honor, the witness is ready. Amara nodded. Bring him in. The doors opened. Jordan Montgomery walked in. Age 23 now, tall, built with a quiet strength. But when his eyes met Rick's, he paused, because the man who once made him bleed now looked like a scarecrow in a cage. Jordan took the stand, raised his hand, swore the oath, and then he told the story. I was 13, he said. Bike was mine. Christmas gift. My name was engraved on the handlebar. He paused, swallowed. He stopped me, asked whose bike it was. I said mine. He didn't believe me. The room leaned forward. Every word a drop of acid. He pushed me down, knee on my back. I was crying. I couldn't breathe. He stared directly at Rick. You told me, stop crying like a bitch. Then you kicked me in the ribs. 3 times. Rick looked down. Jordan's voice didn't shake. You made me feel like my life didn't belong to me. Amara asked no follow-ups. The DA thanked him. He stepped down, but the silence he left behind was loud. Then Amara did something no one expected. She turned toward the jury and said, I have a statement to enter into the record. From this bench, as a judge, as a woman, as a black American. Murmurs. Her clerk looked startled. The bailiff blinked. But Amara didn't waver. When Mr. Voller cut my hair in this courtroom, many people said it was just emotional, that he snapped, that it wasn't physical violence. But what they missed is what every black woman in America already knew. She looked directly into the cameras. That act wasn't about hair. It was about power. It was about erasure. It was about telling me, I can touch you, and the law won't stop me. She picked up the scissors used that day, now sealed in a bag as evidence, held them in the air. But the law did stop him. And now, so will I. The courtroom exploded, not with shouting, with emotion. Some wept, some clenched fists, some just nodded like a page had finally turned. Amara read the verdict herself, guilty on all counts. Felony assault, civil rights violation, tampering with judicial process, multiple counts of excessive force, pattern of misconduct with racial bias. Rick didn't react. He just sat there, crumbling from the inside out. He wasn't shocked. He was revealed. Then came the sentencing. Amara's voice was calm, like a blade dragged slowly across a surface. You spent years turning men into ghosts. Now you will live among them. You won't be buried, but you will be forgotten. She sentenced him to 27 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 15. No protective custody. As guards moved in to take him away, Rick looked up, eyes glazed, lips cracked. He didn't plead, but his eyes searched Amara's face for something. Mercy? Regret? Fear? She gave him none. Only this. You didn't just lose your job. You lost the illusion that power would always protect you. You lost the permission this country kept giving you, and now it's revoked. Outside, hundreds waited, not to celebrate, to witness, because they knew. This wasn't just about one bad cop. This was about the system finally seeing itself in the mirror and not looking away. Later that evening, Amara returned to her chambers. Alone. The courtroom was empty now, silent, echoing. She stood in the center, took off the robe, ran her fingers through what was left of her hair, closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she exhaled. The bars slammed shut behind Rick Voller like a final sentence. Not just to prison, to everything. His name was scorched, his badge shredded, his reputation unrecognizable. And worse, he was now trapped inside the very world he used to control. No special unit, no protection, just a number now. Number 90321. The guards didn't call him officer. They called him Rick. Sometimes cop. Sometimes worse. In the yard, whispers followed him like shadows. Men pointed. Some stared. Some smiled, the kind of smile that knew Karma by first name. Tyrese Darnell didn't touch him again. He didn't need to. Now it was everyone else. Not with fists, with time. Because in prison, pain isn't always physical. It's the long looks, the rumors, the waiting. Rick didn't eat much, didn't talk. He stopped writing letters, stopped hoping for court appeals. He counted days, not toward release, but toward numbness. Meanwhile, Amara Blackwell became the center of a storm she never asked for. The media branded her the Iron Gavel. Civil rights groups praised her. Hate groups doxed her. Senators asked her to run for office. Networks offered book deals. She said no to all of it, because Amara hadn't done any of this for attention. She did it, because if she hadn't, no one would have. But that didn't mean it was easy. Her chambers were flooded with emails. Some said, "You saved my daughter." Others said, "You're a disgrace to the robe." She read them all, then turned off the notifications. Because praise and poison, they come from the same pipe. The court calendar didn't stop. New cases, new defendants, new stories of pain. And every time she stepped into that courtroom, she felt the weight, not of Rick, of expectation. She had become a symbol. But Amara wasn't made of marble. She was human, and that humanity needed space to breathe. One night, she stayed late. The courtroom was dark, empty, quiet, just the way she liked it. She walked up to the bench, sat down. No robe, no lights, just her. She closed her eyes and remembered the faces of victims, the quiet in Rick's eyes when a verdict was read, Jordan Montgomery's voice, the scissors, and her own silence. When no one else knew, she was afraid too. The door creaked. Her clerk, Dana, stood in the doorway. Didn't mean to interrupt. Amara opened her eyes. "You're not." Dana hesitated. "Do you regret it?" Amara looked down, thought hard, then shook her head. "No, but I carry it." Dana stepped closer. "Everyone thinks you're made of stone." Amara almost smiled. Then they've never watched stone crack. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A small envelope on her desk. No name. Inside, a single Polaroid. Of a boy, maybe 13, on a bike. On the back, "This was me. Thank you for showing the world I mattered." JM. Amara held the photo like it was made of glass. Because sometimes after all the noise, all the trials, one picture is louder than 1,000 protests. Back in prison, Rick walked alone. No friends, no enemies, just space. And time. The cafeteria buzzed. Men laughed, guards shouted. But Rick stayed in his head, where the echo of Amara's voice still played. You didn't just lose your job. You lost the illusion that power would always protect you. He whispered that sentence to himself, sometimes, not to mock it, to remember who he was and what he'd never be again. It started with a knock. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate. Amara looked up from her desk. Papers spread across the wood. Her glasses were off. Her eyes were tired. "Come in," she said. The door creaked open. A tall young man entered, maybe early 20s, hesitant, eyes darting. He looked familiar, but older, more grounded. She narrowed her eyes. "Jordan." He nodded once. "I didn't want to email," he said. "I wanted to say it to your face." Amara stood slowly. Jordan stepped forward, but not too close. "I spent 10 years thinking I deserved what happened to me," he said, "thinking that silence was the cost of survival." He paused. "You changed that." Amara felt her throat tighten, just slightly. Jordan continued. "I used to think a courtroom was a place you went to lose something. Your freedom, your name, your story. But when I saw you that day, standing there, even after what he did, I realized the truth." He looked her dead in the eye. "You didn't just judge him. You protected all of us." Silence. A different kind. One that didn't demand words. Amara sat. Jordan didn't leave. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a frame wrapped in cloth. He placed it on her desk, unwrapped it. Inside, the photo again. Him on the bike, smiling. Before it happened. But next to it, a second photo. Him in court, testifying. Jaw steady, shoulders back. Two versions of the same boy. One taken, one reclaimed. On the bottom, "Thank you for giving me back my name." Amara couldn't speak, so she just nodded, slowly, with all the weight it deserved. Later that week, Amara walked the courthouse halls alone. No security, no cameras, just the sound of heels on tile and fluorescent lights humming above. She passed bailiffs, clerks, interns. Some nodded, some didn't. It didn't matter. But as she turned the final corner toward her chambers, she saw someone she didn't expect. Dana, her longtime clerk, standing by the wall holding a box. Moving out, Amara asked. Dana smiled. "No, moving into my own courtroom." Amara raised an eyebrow. "State just appointed me. Juvenile division." Amara's expression softened. Dana stepped closer, voice quieter. "I just wanted you to know. I applied because of you." She paused. "Not because you're perfect. Because you weren't afraid to stand in your imperfection and still do what was right." Amara didn't blink, but her voice softened. "I'm proud of you." Dana smiled, then did something unexpected. She hugged her. Tight, not rushed, no politics, no protocol. Just a woman saying thank you to the one who showed her how to walk through fire without burning. That evening, Amara visited her parents. Her mother opened the door, apron on, music playing. "Come in, baby." Amara stepped into the kitchen. The smell of cornbread, the low hum of Marvin Gaye. She sat, quiet. Her mother handed her a cup of tea, sat across from her, then reached out, took Amara's hand. "Your father would have been proud." Amara looked down. Her mother continued, "You've done more in 1 year than most do in a lifetime." "But it doesn't feel like enough," Amara admitted. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Because you weren't fighting for praise. You were fighting for presence." That line hit different. Amara breathed in, deep, and let it go. Back in prison, Rick sat in the common area. A group of men were playing chess nearby, another group watching TV. No one talked to him, but they didn't need to. Rick wasn't looking for a fight anymore. He was just listening. And in that silence, in that stillness, he heard something he'd never heard before. Accountability. Not given, not demanded, just allowed. He picked up a book someone left on his bunk. The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin. He started reading, line by line, and for the first time in years he didn't skim. A Thursday afternoon. Quiet. Overcast. The courthouse cafeteria was half empty. Amara sat alone by the window, her lunch untouched, eyes distant. She watched the wind ruffle a tree outside, brittle branches, but still standing. She thought of her father, of Jordan, of the silence between generations. Then a voice broke through. "Excuse me, Judge Blackwell." She looked up. A girl, maybe 19, fresh-faced, nervous, wearing an ID badge that said, "Intern, first year, PRE Law." Amara nodded. "Yes." The girl stepped forward, fumbling slightly. I've been assigned to your chambers next week. I wanted to introduce myself." Amara smiled politely. "I'm glad you did." The girl hesitated, then sat down across from her, uninvited but not unwelcome. "I wanted to say something," she said, voice trembling just a little. "I saw what happened. In court. The hair, the case, everything." Amara looked at her fully now. The girl continued. "My aunt cried watching you speak. Said she'd never seen a black woman do that on live TV without apologizing after." She looked down. "I guess I just want you to know, you made me believe there's a place for people like me in law, not just as background, but as voice." Silence. Amara didn't reply right away. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small notebook. Worn. Lined pages half filled with quotes and ideas. She slid it across the table. "Take this," she said. The girl blinked. "What is it?" "My first notebook. From law school. It's messy. Some parts don't make sense. But it kept me honest." The girl touched the cover like it was sacred. Amara added, "Legacy isn't about memory. It's about momentum. Pass it forward when it's time." The girl nodded, eyes wet. "I will." That evening, Amara took a different route home. She walked. No security. Just her heels on the sidewalk, the rhythm of her breath, and the city stretching wide around her. She passed a barber shop. Stopped. Inside, a group of men laughing, debating sports. Marvin Gaye on the speaker. Posters of Ali on the wall. She stepped inside. The chatter stopped. The barber looked up. "Well, damn," he said. "We got royalty in the house." Amara smirked. "Just someone overdue for a shape-up." They laughed, greeted her with warmth, respect. She sat in the chair. The barber adjusted the mirror. "Leave a scar?" he asked, pointing to the small patch in her twists where Rick had cut her hair. She looked at herself, paused, then nodded. "Leave it." Elsewhere, back in the juvenile court building, Dana, now Judge Dana Collins, presided over her first solo hearing. The case was tough. A 14-year-old girl caught with stolen property, her mother absent, her record bruised, but not broken. Dana read the file, sat in silence, then looked at the girl. "What happened doesn't define you," she said, calm but firm. "What you do next will." The girl nodded, scared but listening. Dana offered probation and community service and handed her a card. On the back, Blackwell Foundation, Youth Legal Mentorship. The girl looked up. "You're giving me a second chance?" Dana shook her head. "No, I'm giving you your chance." And somewhere, far from the courtroom, in a prison library, Rick Voller sat alone. Still reading. Still silent. A book of Baldwin open on his lap. His finger traced one line again and again. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. He didn't cry, but He finally closed the book like he meant it. That weekend, Amara returned to the church where her father once preached. She sat in the back row, watched a youth choir sing, eyes closed, hands raised. No performance, just presence. The pastor, a young woman in white, took the mic. She didn't mention Amara by name, but she said this: "There are warriors in robes now. There are fighters who don't throw punches. There are sisters who stand so tall, even injustice can't look them in the eye anymore." Amara lowered her head, not to hide, to pray, not for herself, for the ones coming next. As the service ended, a child no older than 10 walked up to her. Dark skin, wide eyes, hair full of promise. She didn't speak, just held up a drawing. Amara took it. It was her, in a robe, in front of a courtroom. But the caption written in crayon said, "She protects the crown." Amara smiled, and this time she let the tears fall. Quiet, steady, not because she was sad, but because she finally understood. Legacy isn't the echo of what you've done. It's the voice that keeps speaking after you leave the room. It didn't happen overnight. Movements never do. But the ripples started the moment Judge Amara Blackwell spoke the truth without compromise, and the world had no choice but to hear it. And once it was heard, it could not be unheard. Television newsrooms changed. The footage of the courtroom, Amara standing firm, Rick shrinking, was replayed on every major network. But for once, it wasn't just shocking. It was instructional. Pundits debated her judicial tone, but many, especially young black female journalists, called it what it truly was. This is what dignity under fire looks like. She didn't lose control. She reclaimed the space. She didn't silence the system. She made it listen. The editorial boards began to shift. New anchors referenced Amara's ruling as precedent for discussing race and misconduct with less false balance and more truth. Books classrooms changed. Law professors added her closing remarks into curriculum. Students studied her tone, her technique, her refusal to turn anger into apology. And for the first time in some universities, they held courses not just on judicial ethics, but on judicial resistance. One class assignment went viral. Write a ruling as if your robe weighs 300 years of injustice, and you are still required to stand tall. Schools changed. In inner-city high schools, students who never cared about courtrooms now walked around quoting her. She said, "This court is not just a room, it's a mirror." That's hard. One 11th grade teacher in Chicago had her students write letters to someone they felt silenced by. A student turned in a letter addressed to every officer who ever looked through me. And at the bottom, she wrote, "I saw myself in Judge Blackwell. Now, I know I belong in rooms that try to lock me out." Classical building policy began to move. Quietly, steadily, legislators began pushing reform. Not just about use of force, about judicial training, about the representation of women of color on the bench. One proposal was unofficially named the Blackwell Clause, a line requiring mandatory review of any sealed officer misconduct after repeat offenses. It was small, but real, and it started because a woman refused to flinch when a man tried to take something from her, and she responded not with rage but with law. Office building law firms shifted. Younger lawyers of color cited the case as their reason for joining the bar. Interview rooms that used to ask, "Can you handle pressure?" now asked, "How would you handle a courtroom that hates your presence?" A new answer began circulating. Like Judge Blackwell, I'd stay seated, stand tall, and speak as if the world was finally listening. Folded hands churches spoke her name. On pulpits and in sermons, Black pastors began referencing her moment as a kind of modern psalm. She became a symbol of strength, not for power, but for containment of power. Justice, one preacher said, isn't loud, it's unshakable, and this sister proved it can wear a robe without selling its soul. Sephian online, the culture shifted. Memes turned into murals, tweets into think pieces. Her face was drawn on alley walls and protest signs. Not as a hero, but as proof that even the system, when shaken hard enough, can listen. Hashtag hands off her crown became more than a hashtag. It became a mantra. For Black girls. For survivors. For truth-tellers who never got the mic. Back in the prison, Rick sat in the corner of the library, no longer reading Baldwin. Now, legal dictionaries, case law. It wasn't about escaping his sentence. He had stopped believing in escape. Now, he was trying to understand, not for defense, but for reckoning. Inmates no longer laughed when he asked legal questions. Some even offered their own stories. And when he listened, really listened, he realized he hadn't just hurt people. He built his entire life on a belief that some people didn't count. And now, he counted every one of them. By name, by memory, by guilt. And Amara? She stayed where she was. Same courtroom, same robe, same scar in her twist, still visible, still deliberate. People kept asking her to run for office, to write a book, to become a brand. She said no. I'm not here to be followed, she told a reporter. I'm here to make sure someone else can lead. And they did. New judges, new voices, new stories, this time without interruption. One day, months later, a small girl stood outside the courthouse with her mother. She was holding a drawing of a woman with braids, a gavel, and the caption. She didn't yell, but everyone heard her. Inside, Amara walked past the security line. The guards nodded. The clerk smiled. But Amara? She walked past it all, into her courtroom, sat down, opened a new case file, and whispered to herself, not as a declaration, but a reminder. Justice isn't loud, but it echoes. Fall, late afternoon. The air held that crisp, in-between chill, not summer, not winter, just stillness. Judge Amara Blackwell stood on the steps of the courthouse, alone. Her robe was off, her hair tied back, scars still visible. No press, no bodyguards, just her. She looked up at the building, tall, gray, cold. She'd given it years. It had taken more than that. And yet she still stood, not because she loved the system, but because she refused to leave it in the hands of those who didn't. She heard footsteps behind her. Soft, hesitant. She turned. A boy, no older than 12. Thin, hoodie too big, face familiar. He looked up at her. You're her, right? He asked. She smiled. Who do you think I am? He pointed at her hair. You're the lady the cop touched. Her face stayed calm. Yes, that's me. He looked down. My big cousin told me you made him cry, and he never cries. He said you looked that man in the eye and made him disappear without yelling. Amara didn't laugh, but something flickered in her chest. Your cousin has a good memory. He shifted his feet, reached into his backpack, pulled out a small envelope. It's for you, he said. He said to give it if I ever saw you. She took it. The boy ran off. Didn't ask for a photo. Didn't stay. He just passed a message. Amara opened the envelope. Inside, a simple note. I watched you walk through fire, and I finally believed I could do the same. I'm in law school now. I carry your name in every room they once said I didn't belong in. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know. Darius M. Amara folded the note gently, held it in both hands. No tears, just stillness. That note, it wasn't for praise. It was for proof. Later that night, Amara walked through her apartment. No news on, no emails, just music. She sat by the window, city lights blinking beyond the glass. She picked up an old photo. Her father, standing at the pulpit, one hand raised, one hand holding her as a child. She whispered, I'm still standing, Daddy. She placed the photo down, closed her eyes. Across town, in a prison library, Rick Voller sat at a table, staring at a piece of paper. He'd written it 3 times, torn it up twice, but this time he didn't. It was a letter, addressed not to Amara, not to the court, but to himself. Asterisk, you let power become your skin. So, when it was stripped away, you didn't know who you were. But now you know. You are the weight of your choices. And if there's a way forward, it's through truth, not badge. Asterisk, he folded the page. Didn't send it. Just kept it. Because some truths aren't for forgiveness. They're for facing. 1 week later, community center gym. Saturday morning. Amara walks in quietly. No title. No attention. She's there for a youth debate event, only as a guest, not as a speaker. A 16-year-old girl steps onto the small stage, twists in her hair, chin held high. She looks into the crowd and begins. My name is Zariah, and I want to be a judge, not because I like rules, but because I believe silence can be broken if someone chooses to stand still long enough to be heard. In the back row, Amara closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them, smiling. Zariah doesn't know she's there. She doesn't need to, because legacy doesn't demand recognition. It demands repetition. Final scene. Amara walks home alone. No camera. No headlines. Just footsteps. She passes a mural on a brick wall, her face surrounded by words. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. She stops, traces the outline of the paint with her fingers, then walks on. No pause. No performance. Just presence. Justice doesn't end with a verdict. It continues in the footsteps of those brave enough to stay.